Mr. President, the Senate this week is considering a nominee so patently unfit to be a federal judge, so lacking in the temperament, integrity, and judgment to serve as an arbiter of the nation's laws, that the chorus of opposition has grown deafening, and the facts revealing his unfitness for office are too voluminous to be ignored. I'm speaking, of course, of Amil Bet, the lawyer whose misconduct was so egregious that his fellow prosecutors in the Southern District of New York thought he should be demoted. Someone whose management of cases was so flawed that a federal judge not only concluded that his team had misled the court, but that it withheld exculpatory evidence. And the court then ordered the case dismissed. And the Southern District Prosecutor's Office didn't even bother to try to refile the case. It was that tainted by Mr. Beauvais's leadership of that team. After Beauvais left the U.S. Attorney's Office under the threat of demotion, he became one of Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyers, losing the hush money payment to a porn star case in which Donald Trump was convicted of dozens of felonies. Beauvais, though, turned that loss and his blind obedience to Trump into a top position at the Department of Justice. And now for the past 6 months, it seems like every time there's been an abuse of power at the Justice Department, Amil Bet either directed it, supervised it, or carried it out himself. When Donald Trump wanted to purge the Justice Department of prosecutors who worked diligently to investigate the January 6th insurrection, Beauvais was the instrument of his vengeance. When Trump wanted to purge the Department of Prosecutors who proved to juries beyond a reasonable doubt that the violent offenders who attacked police officers that day did so to interfere with the peaceful transfer of power, Amil Bet was there to punish not the criminals, but the prosecutors. When Stephen Miller and then FBI Director Kash Patel worked to carry out an additional purge of career FBI officials who worked on the January 6th investigations, Amil Bet was there too. Earlier this year, when the Trump administration wanted a justification to freeze grants already approved from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, and they wanted to trump up some justification, some rationale for trying to prevent the distribution of these funds, who did they turn to? Well, of course, they turned to Amil Bet. He and then U.S. Attorney Ed Martin pressured the head of the criminal division for the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office to open a criminal investigation into the fund. But there was a problem. There was no evidence of criminal activity. There was no probable cause. There was no predication. And how do we know this? How do we know the opening of this case or the threat of opening this case was bogus? Because the chief of the criminal division in that office resigned rather than comply with this unethical edict. When Trump's DOJ sought to dismiss a serious and credible corruption case against the mayor of New York, Eric Adams, who was the one who ordered career prosecutors to drop the case? That's right, Amil Bet. Time after time, we have seen career public servants stand up to abuses of power like this and refuse to obey, leaving careers they loved at the Justice Department rather than be part of Beauvais's perversion of justice. I served for almost 6 years in the Justice Department. I know the sense of mission that the lawyers in that department feel and how much they love serving and appearing before a court and introducing themselves as on behalf of the United States. It is not a job that people give up easily or for no reason. But I also know that when put in the position of choosing to follow their ethics in the law or choosing to obey a dishonorable and dishonest instruction from a supervisor, yes, they will resign their post, and so many have. Acting U.S. Attorney Danielle Sassoon was ordered by Beauvais to dismiss the indictment against Eric Adams. In refusing, She called it what it was: an improper offer of immigration enforcement assistance in exchange for the dismissal of his case. In other words, a quid pro quo. Now, I just want to underscore for people what this means and how astonishingly abnormal, unethical this action was. The Justice Department intervened in a criminal case in New York over the objection of the prosecutors handling the case, including the acting U.S. attorney, to dismiss that corruption case against a public official, not because there was a lack of evidence. They didn't even try to claim that. Not because there was any prosecutorial misconduct. They didn't even try to argue that. But because he was useful to the president on his immigration policy. It is an edict from Beauvais that says, if you do the president's bidding, we've got your back. We'll make your corruption case go away. Quid pro quo. Now, interestingly, they didn't want it to go away completely. They wanted it to go away without prejudice. That is, so they could bring it back if he didn't do exactly what the president wanted. Anyone who's ever served in the Justice Department can tell you just how unethical that is. And rather than obey those orders from Beauvais, the acting U.S. attorney, Sassoon, resigned, and many others followed. One of them said, quote, "I expect you will eventually find someone who is enough of a fool or a coward to file your motion. But it was never going to be me." No, it didn't have to be him, because it was enough for Amil Bet. He is there whenever Donald Trump needs someone to carry out his will, regardless of ethical or even legal considerations. And dedicated public servants, career prosecutors are standing up to him, willing to risk their jobs, willing to risk retaliation by a vindictive president. Some of those brave attorneys have come to our committee as whistleblowers. In one case, Erev Raveni, a 15-year veteran at the department who worked in both Republican and Democratic administrations, shared with our committee that Amil Bet told DOJ lawyers that they would need to consider telling the courts, "F you," and ignore any such court order that might get in the way of the Trump administration's strategy of rapid deportation without due process. And in fact, Beauvais's lawyers at DOJ would go on to lie to the judge and violate court orders, prompting the judge to issue an order to show cause why they should not be held in contempt. And Senator Whitehouse is exactly right. The Court of Appeals has delayed that hearing on the order to show cause why those lawyers under Beauvais's supervision should not be held in contempt. And my colleagues here want to rush this thing through. Well, what will they say if the judge finds that Beauvais and others at the Justice Department willfully ignored court orders? What will they say once they've given him a lifetime tenure on the Court of Appeals? Now, during Beauvais's confirmation hearing, I asked him about his FU instruction, and he made the dubious claim that he couldn't recall. Now, that's remarkable. It's not like we're talking about events that happened 10 years ago. This was like 2 months ago, just a few weeks ago. I think I would remember if I had told other lawyers that we should say F you to the courts. So either he instructs them frequently to say F you to the courts, such that he wouldn't remember this particular occasion, or he's being dishonest with us. But his use of that vulgar injunction was corroborated by other DOJ lawyers in text messages, so we really don't need to wonder about this. As one DOJ lawyer texted another, "Guess it's find out time on the FU." Well, now it's find out time for the U.S. Senate, where we find out whether we are willing to confirm just anybody, no matter how unfit, no matter how terrible the record, no matter how abundant the evidence, It is find-out time for the U.S. Senate. Now, what was Beauvais's role in tasking DOJ and FBI to scour old Epstein files and flag mentions of Donald Trump? I know my colleague, Senator Booker, has tried to find out, and Senator Durbin has tried to find out. We don't know because Beauvais refuses to tell us. But we do know that his fellow criminal defense lawyer, Todd Blanche, he and Blanche were the two lawyers that represented Trump in that hush money payment to a porn star case, that Todd Blanche is now rushing to meet with Epstein's chief co-conspirator in jail. It is self-evident that Blanche is there to represent the president's personal interests, not the public interest. And Beauvais represents exactly the same problem. With Beauvais's nomination, we are about to find out if Republicans are content to give a man so routinely in defiance of the rule of law a lifetime job interpreting it on behalf of millions of Americans. We wanted to hear from those whistleblowers like Erev Ravani, just some of the hundreds of public servants who are speaking out, but Republicans declined our request for testimony and additional hearings even as they rushed to jam through this nomination for a lifetime position. And sadly, we will all have a lifetime to regret it. Like so many of his unfit cabinet nominees, Donald Trump is daring Senate Republicans to oppose him. I hope and pray they will, because the pattern is clear. Amil Bet takes orders from Donald Trump, and that is it. His only merit is blind obedience, not to the law, but to the president. And not just any president, but to one who is also a convicted felon. And so I urge my colleagues, look at Beauvais's record of disrespect for the law and reject this dangerous nominee. Mr. President, I yield back.